It always begins the same way. Not with love, not even with recognition, but with possibility. She looks at you, not to see you, but to imagine you, to imagine who you could be. You'll feel it in her gaze, not warmth, not presence, but projection. You think it's connection, but it's calculation. You're not being held, you're being scanned, measured, outlined like an empty figure in a coloring book she's been carrying since girlhood. And you're not the story, you're the placeholder. Carl Jung saw this pattern long before dating coaches turned psychology into clickbait. He didn't speak with charm. He spoke with the clarity of a man who spent decades knee-deep in the human shadow. He named the force you feel, but can't explain. In every woman, there's an inner image, a masculine shape, not a man, but an ideal, a voice, a myth. He called it the Animus, and when it's undeveloped, unexamined, or infected by wounds, it doesn't whisper, it commands. She may not know she's projecting. Most never do, but you'll know by the pressure, by how quickly you're praised, and how suddenly you're replaced. You believed you were chosen, but it wasn't you. It was the echo of a childhood daydream she's been editing for years. You were simply cast in the role of the one who finally understands, until you didn't, until you said no, until you showed a flaw she hadn't scripted. And suddenly, the story must go on, with or without you. New actor, same fantasy. The immature Animus doesn't want partnership. It wants power. Not power over the world, but over its own pain. And when that pain isn't healed, it gets projected onto you. So when she criticizes, moralizes, interrupts, when she debates not to understand but to dominate, know this: you're no longer speaking to her. You're speaking to the voice inside her, the one that sounds like certainty but lives in fear. This isn't about villainizing women. It's about recognizing patterns you were never taught to name. You were taught to celebrate being wanted, but not to question what part of you is being wanted. Is it your truth or your usefulness? She told you you were different, that you were the first to make her feel this way. But if you look closely, you'll see the signs, the recycled lines, the choreographed pain, the script. And when it ends, as it always does, you'll be left blinking, wondering what you did wrong. But here's the truth. You didn't fail her. You just stopped fitting the mask, and she wasn't ready to see what was underneath. Jung warned that the only way out of this psychological theater is through what he called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole within yourself, not through women, not through approval, but through facing the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are beneath the layers you've learned to perform. And here's the uncomfortable part. Most men never even begin that journey. You've been trained, conditioned even, to chase validation, to see yourself through someone else's eyes, to outsource your sense of worth to the whims of attraction. And as long as you do, you'll keep stepping into the same role, again and again, each time hoping that maybe this performance will be enough, that maybe this time the applause will last. But it never does, because you're not playing you, you're playing what you think she wants. And no one respects a man who doesn't even respect his own edges. Individuation isn't glamorous. It isn't spiritual glitter or soft meditations. It's brutal. It will break you open. It will confront you with the weak parts, the hidden parts, the fractured voices you've buried beneath a lifetime of pretending to be fine. It demands that you stop blaming women for not seeing you and start asking why you never really saw yourself. Because here's what Jung understood, and what most men today are terrified to face. You don't become a man by being chosen. You become a man by choosing yourself, not in rebellion, not in bitterness, but in truth. You don't earn worth through affection. You embody it by standing alone, clear-eyed, rooted, self-contained. A man who has faced his own unconscious cannot be seduced by projection. He doesn't need to be worshipped, understood, or completed, because he is no longer a puppet. He is the author. Jung observed that the real tragedy of the modern man isn't that he's overlooked, it's that he's willing to become anything just to be accepted. You call it compromise, you call it commitment, you call it love, but Jung had a different word for it. self-betrayal. Because every time you shapeshift to please, every time you soften your truth to avoid rejection, you betray the very core of your being. And eventually, the betrayal becomes so practiced, it feels like personality. You lose track of where the act ends, and you begin. Jung warned that men who ignore their own psychic development become slaves to the feminine projection, bending themselves like wet clay into the forms demanded by women who themselves are still lost in fantasy. You stop being real. You become agreeable. You become convenient. You become nothing. And women, whether they can name it or not, feel this. They feel the emptiness behind your smile. They feel the performance, even when it's polished. And what you thought would make her stay, your obedience, your predictability, your unwavering devotion, becomes the very thing that dries up her desire. Why? Because the feminine, when it is instinctual and alive, is not drawn to comfort. It's drawn to mystery, to tension, to the man who does not fit neatly into her blueprint. Jung taught that the feminine doesn't crave safety. It craves life, vitality, a man she cannot fully decode. The moment you make yourself fully known, without edges, without boundaries, without resistance, you don't become more lovable. You become invisible. You become replaceable. And this is the paradox that traps most men. You fear being alone more than you fear being false. You would rather vanish inside a lie than feel the cold wind of solitude. You'd rather be tolerated than risk not being chosen. You'd rather be useful than sovereign. And so you cling, you contort, you become a reflection of what you think will keep her. And in doing so, you vanish. But Jung taught that until a man embraces aloneness, until he confronts the silence within him, he will never be whole. He wrote that individuation is not for the faint-hearted. It requires a kind of death, a burning away of the false self, a funeral for every version of you that existed only to be liked. And that death isn't metaphor. It's cellular, it's psychic, it's spiritual. The ego doesn't go quietly. It screams, it bargains, it begs. But if you stay the course, something honest begins to rise. And here's what no one wants to say out loud. Individuation is lonely. Terrifyingly so. Not because you're unloved, but because you begin to see. You begin to recognize the performance in others. You hear the scripts. You sense the masks. You watch people clinging to identities that were handed to them, not chosen. You notice the avoidance, the distraction, the way everyone is trying so hard to look alive, but very few have actually met themselves. You see the way people smile with their mouths but ache behind their eyes. You see the games, the self-deception, the quiet desperation dressed up in success and certainty. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And when you try to share what you see, when you begin to speak from this clarity, from this place of hard-won vision, they mock you. They call you cold, arrogant, detached. They accuse you of being the problem, of overthinking, of being too much. But you're not the problem. You're the mirror. And people hate the mirror when it reflects something they've spent their whole lives avoiding. Jung knew this intimately. He spent decades sitting across from people who were brilliant on the surface, rational, kind, well-adjusted, but hollow beneath. People who had done everything except the one thing that mattered, confronting their own shadow, the parts of themselves they exiled, the truths they couldn't bear to name, the shame that whispered beneath every performance of, "I'm fine." And when it came to women, Jung didn't tread lightly. He warned that many were raised in cultures that encouraged disconnection from the shadow, rewarded them for remaining innocent, emotional, intuitive, whole, just as they were. But wholeness without confrontation is not strength, it's denial. Jung didn't romanticize this idea of innate feminine purity. In fact, he challenged it. He wrote that the greatest psychic danger to women wasn't oppression. It was unconscious identification with the Animus, the masculine inner voice that speaks not from wisdom, but from unexamined rigidity. It's the voice that dominates conversations, moralizes in relationships, and disguises insecurity as superiority. And if a woman fails to face this force, to meet it, question it, integrate it. She doesn't escape it. She becomes its vessel. And then, without even realizing, she projects it onto every man she encounters. He becomes the battleground. He becomes the enemy she cannot name. And you, standing there trying to love her, become the target of a war that has nothing to do with you. But of course, you don't know this at first. You think you're her savior, the one who'll finally get her, the one who'll prove that not all men are the same. So you try harder, you love louder, you perform better, you sacrifice deeper, all the while believing that if you can just be good enough, real enough, present enough, she'll finally see you. But that's not how projection works. Jung warned, projection is a thief. It robs you of the truth and replaces it with a fantasy. And no matter how noble your intentions, you cannot love someone out of their illusions, because illusions are safer than reality, safer than intimacy, safer than seeing themselves. So you both fall into the same pattern, the same tragedy. She blames you for breaking the spell. You blame her for withdrawing the love that once felt unconditional. Neither of you understands that the entire relationship was built on shadow. Hers, yours, both. And here's the cruelest irony of all. The same woman who once saw you as her savior will, in time, turn on you. Not because you failed her, but because you failed to maintain the illusion. You didn't betray her. You simply stepped out of character. You stopped being the fantasy. And to someone who isn't conscious of their projections, that feels like betrayal. That feels like war. She won't even know she's doing it. She'll rewrite the story in her head. She'll remember you as cold, distant, unreliable, not because it's true, but because it has to be true, because the alternative is too painful. To admit she was never in love with you, only with what you represented. And this is what Jung called inevitable psychological betrayal. What happens when two people refuse to take responsibility for their own inner landscapes? You didn't lie to her. You didn't trick her. You simply couldn't become the imaginary man she needed you to be in order to avoid facing herself. You were never him. And that is what she cannot forgive. Jung once said, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And nowhere is this more true than in love. Because love, real love, not the fantasy, not the performance, is the mirror that doesn't blink. It shows you what you are and what you are not. And that is terrifying to anyone still clinging to the script they were handed before they even knew how to write their own name. Both men and women walk into relationships not as whole beings, but as walking projections, haunted by ghosts they've never named, dragging behind them a trail of unmet needs, unspoken fears, and unresolved wounds from childhood. They don't enter love, they enter reenactment. You call it chemistry, you call it fate, you call it finally finding the one, but Jung called it what it truly is: possession, a takeover of the psyche by the unconscious, a seduction not by the other, but by the idea of the other. And like a man hypnotized, you follow the same path, convinced that this time it will be different. But it never is, because the pattern doesn't change until you do. And that only happens when you're willing to ask the most brutal question a man can ask himself. What if I'm the one responsible for all of this? You want to blame her. Of course you do. You want to call her manipulative. Say she misled you. Say she changed. You want to list every moment she confused you, disappointed you, left you feeling disposable. But Jung wouldn't let you off that easy. He would look at you, not with judgment, but with surgical precision, and ask, why did you let yourself be chosen by that woman in the first place? Why did you ignore your gut? Why did you overlook the red flags? Why did you hand over your sense of worth like it was hers to carry? You see, the man who refuses to confront his own inner feminine, his anima, is forever doomed to project her onto every woman he meets. He doesn't fall in love with the woman. He falls in love with the missing part of himself that he has not yet integrated. And then he clings to her, idolizes her, and eventually resents her for failing to complete him. You are not a victim. You are a volunteer. You chose the mask. You chose the performance. You chose to be the actor in someone else's dream, because facing your own emptiness Your own lack of identity, your own shapelessness, was more terrifying than disappearing inside her fantasy. And here's where most men check out. This is where they stop listening, because this is where the comfort ends and the responsibility begins. Jung didn't hand out formulas. He didn't sell 10-step solutions or promise dominance over women. He offered something far more dangerous, the call to face yourself without flinching, to sit in silence, to watch your illusions crack, to feel the panic rise when the voice in your head tells you that you are nothing without her, and to sit with that voice until it finally dies. And it will fight. That voice will thrash and beg. It will whisper that you're unworthy, that you're incomplete, that you are only half of a whole, and that wholeness lies in her eyes, her touch, her approval. It will tell you that no man can exist without feminine affirmation. But Jung's work whispers something far more dangerous. It whispers that the man who can stand, truly stand, without her, without applause, without being needed, without performing, is the man who is finally free, free from illusion, free from dependency, free from the exhausting tyranny of being someone else's idea of a man. And when you reach that place, you don't become cold, you don't become cruel, you become real, you become rooted, solid, present. You stop asking to be seen, you see yourself, and ironically, paradoxically, that's when women will feel the most drawn to you, not because you chase them, not because you impress them, but because you don't need them. Your presence is no longer a performance, it's a signal, and it says, I am here, I am whole, I am not asking you to complete me, and that is what magnetizes the feminine, not your perfection, but your groundedness, and you'll smile, not from arrogance, not from detachment, but from a quiet understanding, because you'll finally know she, too, is on her own journey, her own path of awakening, her own dance with projection, shadow, and truth, and you will no longer need to save her or be saved by her, that she must face her own animus, that she must wake from her own illusions. That is her work, not yours. You can't do it for her. You can't save her from the war inside her own psyche. No matter how much you love her, no matter how badly you want to, you can hold space, but you cannot carry her. And that's where most men stumble. They confuse love with rescue, presence with fixing. But Jung knew better. He didn't become a lighthouse by chasing ships. He simply stood where he was, grounded in truth, radiating clarity. That's all you can do. Walk your own path so relentlessly, so fearlessly, that your very presence becomes a mirror, one that reflects the raw, unedited truth to anyone brave enough to look. Most won't. Most will flinch, look away, curse you for showing them something they're not ready to see. But a few, a rare, awakened few, will thank you for it. And that, my friend, is the difference between being loved for the role you play and being respected for the man you've become. And when that moment finally lands, when you realize you no longer need to perform, something strange will begin to happen. You'll notice how uncomfortable your presence makes people. You won't even have to speak. They'll feel it. They'll feel the weight of your being, the stillness in your posture, the clarity in your eyes, and it will unsettle them. Not because you become dangerous, but because you become unpredictable. You no longer fit inside their categories. You're no longer playing the game. Jung warned that the individuated man is never embraced by society. He's feared, misunderstood, labeled as arrogant, cold, aloof. But the truth, the part that really threatens them, is that you've become unbuyable, untouchable, unmanipulable, because you no longer need the approval that once controlled you. And here's where it gets almost comedic. The very people who once clung to your every word, the ones who sought your validation, your affection, your availability, will begin to resent you for not needing theirs. They'll feel abandoned, though you've never left. They'll call you emotionally unavailable, though you've never been more present. They'll say you're too in your head, too serious, too much. But what they really mean, though they'll never admit it, is that they can no longer control you. You've stepped off their stage. You've stopped reading from their script. And without the script, they don't know what to do with you, because you've stopped being a character and started being a man. Jung once joked that the gods had become diseases, that what ancient cultures called divine possession, we now call neurosis. And he wasn't being cute. He was pointing at something modern men still don't understand, that every unresolved archetype, every unlived truth, every unacknowledged wound, when denied long enough, festers into pathology. Make no mistake, the men most infected by this are not the cold ones, not the aggressive ones, but the romantics, the desperate, the ones who believe she is everything. You think it's noble when you say, "I'd do anything for her." You think it's love when you say, "She's my world." But Jung would shake his head. He'd see it for what it is, abandonment of self disguised as devotion, because what you call love is often nothing more than your refusal to carry your own soul. It's easier to place it in her hands, to make her the carrier of your meaning, your hope, your identity, because if she holds it, you don't have to. If she becomes your purpose, you don't need to find your own. And that's not love. That's dependency, that's projection, that's spiritual laziness dressed up in poetic language. You've outsourced your depth, and now you fear what will happen when she puts it down. But here's the brutal twist. When she finally realizes she was never meant to carry your soul, she will drop it, not out of cruelty, not out of betrayal, but because she must. No woman, no matter how devoted, no matter how intuitive, no matter how much she loves you, can hold the weight of a man who refuses to hold himself. And when she drops it, you'll feel it like a death. The illusion will collapse, and with it, the fantasy that someone else was supposed to do the work for you. But that pain, sharp as it is also your liberation, because in that moment, you finally stand face to face with the truth that the work of becoming a man was never hers to do. It was always yours. And in that raw clarity, with the wreckage of the illusion at your feet, you have two choices. You can lash out, you can call her names, you can run to the echo chambers filled with bitter men who point fingers, mock women, and wallow in their blame like broken boys masquerading as warriors. Or you can do what Jung would have demanded of you. You can go inward. You can begin the lonely, terrifying, necessary work of becoming whole, not for her, not to win, not to impress, but because you are the one who has been waiting for you all along. Because the truth is, and it's a truth most will spend their lives avoiding, the woman you've been searching for out there is a reflection of the part of yourself you've abandoned, until you reclaim her, until you meet your own inner feminine, not as weakness, but as the lost half of your soul. Every relationship will be a performance. Every "I love you" will be a mask. Every touch will echo with emptiness. But when you do the work, when you stop chasing completion in another and begin integrating your own depths, something miraculous happens. You stop needing, you stop chasing, you stop twisting yourself into shapes for women who never knew who you were in the first place. You stop playing roles. You become rooted, grounded, present, and from that stillness, a new kind of magnetism emerges, not the desperate kind that begs to be noticed, but the kind that radiates truth. You no longer attract women who want a fantasy. You attract women who want the real, because you've become real yourself. And you'll know when it happens. You'll feel it, because she won't ask for a show. She won't expect a performance. She won't fall in love with potential or projection, or your silence pretending to be strength. She'll look at you, without masks, without myth, and she'll stay, not because she needs to be saved, but because she's already saved herself. She won't make you the center of her meaning. She won't ask you to carry her soul. She's done the work. She's met her shadow. She's reconciled with her animus. She's burned through her own illusions, just as you have burned through yours. And that's why, when she finally stands before you, she won't ask you to bend. She won't mold you. She won't fix you. She won't complete you. She'll meet you, fully, honestly, as a woman who no longer needs to be worshipped, only seen, as a woman who doesn't want to play God in your life, only to walk beside you as an equal. No masks, no games, no roles, just presence. Two humans, two souls, two mirrors, and the space between them. Finally real, And in that meeting, there is no desperation. There is no clinging, no begging to be seen, no posturing to be loved. There is no performance. There is only truth. And that truth, as Jung taught, is the rarest, most dangerous kind of love, the kind that demands nothing, yet offers everything, because it is not born from need. It is born from freedom, the freedom to choose, the freedom to walk away, the freedom to stand side by side without illusion, without masks, without fear. That kind of love cannot be earned. It can only be met. But let me warn you, most of you will never experience this, not because you don't want it, but because you'll quit before you get there. You'll settle for the script, for the fantasy, for the fragile validation of being seen as someone you are not. Because facing who you really are, stripped of charm, stripped of roles, stripped of armor, still feels unbearable. But if you can resist that temptation, if you have the courage, the brutal, soul-wrenching courage, to keep walking anyway, to keep standing alone, to keep peeling away every layer you built to be accepted, then eventually you will arrive at the edge of something terrifyingly beautiful. You will find yourself, and when you do, women will no longer be the source of your identity. They will no longer be the mirrors you use to feel like a man. They will become something else entirely. Partners, not prizes. Mirrors, not mothers. Allies, not saviors. And you will love them, not because you need to, but because you choose to. From strength, from sovereignty, from a wholeness that no longer asks for permission to exist, from a place that knows, without apology, who you are. Carl Jung didn't hand us a map. He left us a warning that every man who refuses to confront his own unconscious will be forever trapped in the projections of others, especially the projections of women. But he also left us a challenge, the challenge to become whole, the challenge to walk the path of individuation, to stop blaming women for the roles we volunteer to play, to stop outsourcing our wholeness to someone else's gaze, to stop waiting to be chosen. Because the man who chooses himself fully, unapologetically, relentlessly, is the man who cannot be controlled by fantasy. He cannot be seduced by performance. He cannot be reduced to a character in someone else's narrative. He becomes the author of his own life. And if you've made it this far, if you've felt this message land somewhere deep inside you, don't just scroll away. Don't let this become another piece of content you consume and forget. Take one moment right now to like this video. Share it with another man who needs to hear the truth. Subscribe for more. Your support isn't just for us. It's for the next man, the one still trapped in the illusion, still waiting to be chosen, still giving away his soul without knowing. Help us reach him. Help us wake him up. Help us set him free, one man at a time.